Putting stuff away yesterday. Did you want to keep these? Yeah, I kind of do. Okay, okay, that's why I left it, yeah, perfect, okay.
They also have the sheet up there for the page numbers, right? All right, I'll call the committee meeting to order, the Senate Finance Committee. When you come up, HB1 is on the table there. The list of the people that are on there that are testifying today and the page numbers that apply in HB1. Not that you have to do anything with it, but if there is a question or anything that comes up about the numbers, it is there for you. Certainly we want you to be as succinct as possible. The Senate rules on committee hearings are invoked, so we're not repeating and doing all those other things. So, and with that, we have the Board of Tax and Land Appeals.
All right, can everyone hear me? Great. Good afternoon, Chairman Gray and honorable members of Senate Finance. My name is Eric Wind. I'm a member of the Board of Tax and Land Appeals, and seated to my right is Ann Stelmack, the board's executive director. On behalf of the board, we are pleased to provide an overview of the board's budget request for the next biennium. We are keenly aware of the budgetary constraints facing this state, and that House Bill 1 came over from the House without a meaningful appropriation and with all agency staff abolished. As such, we are here to provide meaningful information on our budgetary needs and to meet that would be necessary to meet the statutory mandates that the board is charged with fulfilling. We have a packet for you. We will go through it page by page, but at a high level, we have laid this out with 3 different efficiency options. First is the board's budget request as presented by Governor Ayotte. Second is a group of efficiency options for a slimmed down budget request where spending can be reduced by 9% and fees can be assessed for adjustment and up to a 3-fold increase in revenues collected by the board. Finally, in response to the language that had been in House Bill 2, we, of course, want to express our full willingness to discuss further structural changes that could redefine the board, its jurisdiction, its mandate, and the future role of an investigative and adjudicative board in the administration of taxation in New Hampshire. So as you will hear in greater detail as we go forward, option 1 maintains funding for 1 vacant position. There are also 2 board proposed amendments that are in House Bill 2 that we'll go over with you that we believe will provide some efficiencies going forward. And then option 2 is kind of more open with the elimination of the vacant position, discussion of why the vacant position we're seeking to maintain it, and then also we'll go over fees. So first, I will turn to Director Stelmack to go over a comparison of the budgetary lines.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Gray, Senators. So the initial request from this committee was to compare the 24 and 25 budgets to what the House approved. And as you know, we have $3 of funding in House Bill 1 with all of our positions abolished. So I'm actually going to just take it back to what the governor approved and analyze those changes. The board's budget is 90% generally funded, 10% from the highway fund for the eminent domain reimbursement work that we do. Our budget is 80% salary and benefits. 11% of that, 11% of the budget is non-discretionary spending, leaving us with 9% that is actually discretionary spending. We exercised and reduced our budget. We took the fiscal 25 appropriation, we reduced it by 4%. The governor, during that hearing process, approved slightly higher, And part of that reason was we had a position that was in the middle of a reclassification and some step increases. So we had to go back after our budget hearing with the governor, and that when we put the budget in August, come November, when those changes took effect, it was suggested that from the business office that we contact and get those changes put in. So our request was slightly higher, and you'll see that on our first slide, because of just the changes in personnel and things like that. So that was an adjustment made. And then further down, so the requests were slightly higher than what we asked for. And again, it was a choice. We believe we know we cannot hire an appraiser. We cannot pay them what the going rate is out in municipalities. That position has been vacant for 3 years. We worked with personnel. They said, well, we could reclassify it and try to get some of the duties accounted for. And the governor agreed to leave that position in so we could work with personnel. So our Plan A, as Member Wynn indicated, would be to keep that funding for that position. So that we could use it. We used to be a staff of 8, and we are now a staff of 3. We have 3 board members, myself, and 2 other legal administrative staff. And this position would bring some technical expertise that the board and myself both would use if we were able to keep that funding. The governor's budget also made some slighter reductions in rent and IT, but strictly speaking, a bulk of it was the personnel changes that we were already in process of making with personnel. So that's sort of our comparison. So we would, our request is to put the funding in our current positions back in the budget, and certainly, though, if that cannot be done, then if the only choice would be to lose the tax review appraiser, we would concede to that. However, in House Bill 2, we would have to make a change either way to take that restriction, because it's a statutory position. We would need that taken out. So that request is also in here.
So that would allow you to hire on a need basis from one of the companies out there that are doing assessing?
We could move it to a Class 102 contract class. We had done that before. We went to Governing Council to do that. And what we were finding is the timing of the needs and basically the timing of the end of the biennium, that money ended up lapsing. But yes, that's certainly an option to contract for services. We did work with personnel on that. The next slide represents our actual expenses over the course of the last 10 years. And I broke those down on a fiscal year basis, taking the actual monies we expended, less the highway revenue, pointing out what we bring in unrestricted revenue, which is fees. And we took our adjusted actual expenses after the income. And on a fiscal year basis, whether you run it on a fiscal year or a calendar year basis, we have roughly 400 new appeals that are filed with us each year. And those numbers have been consistent over a decade. 400 taxpayers come every year. I broke down the actual cost of appeal ranges from $1,500 up to $2,700 with a 10-year average of $1,967 per case. So we wanted to make sure that the committee had the right cost for appeal. And that's, again, taking all of our expenses less the income, just like you would a business. The next slide, I will turn over.
The next slide, I don't think I need to repeat at great length, but these are essentially the plans A, B, and C as laid out. So then let's move on to House Bill 1 and House Bill 2 requests. So I'll let Director Stelmack do that again. I don't have.
Oh, okay. Yep. Yeah, our next slide would be, in the governor's budget, there was an extra $30,000 placed in Class 50. And to be honest, we would recommend removing that in our Plan A. That's not monies we need, so that definitely could come out. And in House Bill 2, yep.
So again, that's with Plan A, and we certainly are not asking for an increase in our appropriations in this year. So how that 30,000 made it into, there's some background if you want to know, but we don't want it. So if we go to House Bill 1 amendment, you see the provision where the position numbers were abolished. The first position number, the 14,583, is the presently unfilled position, which is the review appraiser. And so that would need to be changed. The next page goes over the efficiency changes, proposals to House Bill 2 that the board proposed at the outset of the budget. One is changing to remove the statutory review appraiser. As we discussed before, we simply cannot afford a full-time appraiser at the market rates. The second relates to the Eminent Domain Procedure Act, where there's a requirement in current law that hearings be held in the county courthouse or otherwise in the county where the taking is occurring, and we simply cannot get court space anymore. So we did ask for that change so that our staff was not pursuing that option, and we could legally hold the hearings here at our hearing room in Concord. This has also been considered as House Bill 268, and it did pass the House with some slightly modified language to maintain an option of hearing in the county, but give the board the authority to determine that it was not possible if we could not find space, and then hold the hearing here in Concord. So next, we turn to 2 sheets on filing fees. Consistent with what we've seen from the House phase, we did go and look at our filing fees when they were established in statute and go through the exercise of applying an inflation adjustment. So most fees to have a case heard by the board are $65. They were last modified in either 1992 or 1993. So that if we apply the inflation adjustment, that gets us around $140. And so we kind of exercised judgment around that down to $125 for most cases. But we also did propose that if the assessed valuation of a property tax appeal was over 1.5 million, there could be a higher fee. So some states have tiered fee structures. Some states have very complicated mathematical formulas to calculate fees. But that is a proposal. And in order to equitably do that in a split jurisdiction state like New Hampshire, where you can choose to either go to the Superior Court or go to the board, we would propose to have all appeals filed with the board initially and then removed to the court with a supplemental fee that for the $125, the lower assessed value properties would be equivalent to the court filing fee, and then for higher assessed properties would be a little bit above with that $75 difference. And then it just goes down all the other statutory filing fees that we have, and I wouldn't say they're recommended adjustments, but we've done the exercise to show what an inflation adjustment would get you. And then if we project that out, that would take an average revenues taken of fees of $19,000 a year, and it would make it about $58,000 a year. And that one big assumption in that is the court's case numbers. We assumed 20% based on the last time that we had that data, but we don't have current data for how many cases the courts are currently hearing. Next, we have actual numbers of cases. So I'll let Director Stelmack go through this chart.
Okay, so this chart, the top part of the chart, basically how we broke this down over a 10-year period. This is based on calendar year, and this chart breaks it down in the 4 general areas of jurisdiction that appears in RSA 71B. And I think it's important to note that throughout the statutes, the board has 70 areas of jurisdiction with 15 original and jurisdictions that are just to the board, not to the court. And besides, when we did an exercise of running our name through the general laws, and it appears 170 times. So, to say the least, these cases represent year by year how many broken down of each type that that had been filed and administered in some fashion. The bottom part of the chart represents on again, a calendar year basis, how many hearings are held, how many orders were issued, and decisions that would have somehow been written after a hearing. And sometimes it's just an order. But I want to be clear that these two sets of data are not related to the extent that what's above showed up at the bottom. That's not how this was done. But there was, we've heard a lot of discussion about how many hearings a year do we hold. And what you'll see is in the next chart, we outline the process because cases, because a lot of them are very different in nature when you have upwards of 70 statutes, they do tend to take a different path. Not everything that comes in the door goes right to a hearing. We have rules that certain cases might go to mediation where others don't. And what I've done is sort of break down those processes and shown you how long it takes us on a typical case, and I'm talking straightforward. It goes without saying that parties can also determine the length of time the case is with the board. But on most cases, we have a great track record of property tax in and out within a year, and that's from the date of filing to the date of resolution. Eminent domain, when there's condemnations, those can take a lot longer because people have to wait. There's a great backlog for appraisals right now, and that absolutely can take a little bit longer. Then we have our cases that we fast track. Equalization by statute, that is an original jurisdiction to the board, that has to be heard and decided within 60 days. We meet that every time. Exemptions and credits and deferrals, because of the type of cases and the nature of them, we definitely get them in from filing and out to resolution under 6 months. The same thing with current use and land use change and state taxes. Absolutely, those are what we call our priority docket. We're very aware that's revenue waiting to come into the state. Reassessments, those are starred because those can go on for years sometimes because of the jurisdiction. And if a town if a petition is filed for a year, obviously reassessments would be prospective. So we might have to hold on to those a year or two out. But again, those a slightly different type of case. And then timber tax, those are often in and out within definitely less than 6 months, sometimes even less than 2. Usually, we do a pretrial system with those where a lot of those tend to resolve a lot quicker. And so that's the timeline of appeals. And then the last one. Yep.
And then the final page in your packet is just a comparison of the BTLA to a court. I don't need to read through all of these, but I think the take-home point is that this is an investigative board. We have authorities that a court does not. We have the authority to open a docket ourselves if we receive complaints, and we do that. So, subject matter expertise, expeditious procedures, the ability to cost effectively get your senior citizen who is just looking for a deferral or just looking for a credit or just looking for an exemption in and out within 6 months. That's what we offer. In addition to the broad reassessment jurisdiction. So with that said, the last comment I have is that...
Questions from the senators?
Questions?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. So I appreciate the exercise on the fee increases, and I can understand why you use the adjusted for inflation. But when it's all said and done, it only produces $40,000 in additional revenue. Now, have you looked at what other states, if there are comparatives as to what they are charging for fees?
So in about 20 states, there is no fee for an administrative review of a municipal or county tax decision. Neighboring states, simply put, both Maine and Vermont are less than $100. I think they're 70 and 6, both less than $100. Massachusetts is the one that has a very complicated tiered filing structure. where you're charged 10 cents per $1,000 of assessed value. We looked at that as well, and that was kind of the inspiration for the $125, $200 split, is to have a higher fee if the assessed value really is that high, that much greater. Because it does, when you look at the filing fee, you have to have a certain amount of assessed value challenged in order to make it cost effective to challenge. So we wanted to be sensitive to the ability to access the board and the ability to challenge decisions.
Maybe just follow up.
Follow up?
So, it's clear from what the House said, it's become the live fee or die state. And I think that's why I was wondering if there was some way to see if there could be reasonable levels that would actually do more for your revenues. But the other question here is that you said that what you would want to do then is say that everybody has to come to you first. So what do you think about potential caseload increase there? And also, just if you could say a little bit more about the timeline if you go to court is likely to be very long, isn't it?
Correct.
So maybe you could just talk about what you would, if everybody came to you first, what would that mean?
That would mean that an initial filing was made at the board, and I do have drafted proposed legislation if this is something that you would like to take a look at. But my proposal would be that within 45 days, they would have to seek
How
to...
many more cases what I was trying to ask?
Oh,
do you
how
think
many
you'd
more
see?
cases?
Yeah.
We're assuming 20% of the tax abatement caseload goes to the Superior Court, so we'd be looking at 50 to 100 cases.
And that would affect your fee, potentially income, if those 20% come to you?
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Additional questions? Oops, Cindy?
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So going back to the issue of the appraiser, if you can't hire one, and if you decided not to contract out for those services, what's the next option?
The next thought, and we talked to personnel about this, was sort of a hybrid position where we could have more of an, instead of a licensed appraiser, we could have someone with more doing investigations. We have to collect data from certain towns at oftentimes. That person could be very helpful. You don't need a license to go in and collect data and sort of do some summaries. And also just having the benefit of somebody with a financial background could help on the administrative side of things, as well as, doing spreadsheets, running reports, doing charts, so it's kind of it would be a lower labor grade than what it currently was appropriated at, but it would be sort of a hybrid. It could work on both ends and seem to be, we could get the tasks done that we need currently without an appraiser. Those tasks don't get done, and that's been the challenge. But again, it's basically, we're just running up against the salary issue, so.
Follow up?
There are some cases where you just can't do the appraisals,
The
and
board,
that would continue?
well, unfortunately, our appraiser that left it's been about 3.5, 4 years ago, he was offered almost over $20,000 in a municipality. So what the board's been doing is, they've been sort of doing, not a full appraisal, but they've been having to do some analysis that they wouldn't normally do. But yeah, it's really hard to replace those services. Yeah, it just doesn't.
Dr. Birdsall?
Thank you, and thank you for taking my question. So, on the eminent domain appeals, is this literally how many eminent domain claims we have for New Hampshire?
Those are the ones that we see are the ones where the state cannot negotiate with the landowner. So when the Division of Right-of-Way at DOT decides they need to, make an acquisition of property, they negotiate with the landowner. And sometimes those landowners will accept the offer. DOT will get an appraisal done, they'll accept the offer. We never see the taking. These are the ones where they did not accept DOT's offer, And then the moment they're filed with us, the title transfers, and then it's up to this board to determine what those damages are for the part taken. And what we're finding, if I can expand on this, is a landowner has every right to contest whether the taking should have happened at all, meaning was there a net public purpose benefit, or is there really a reason to take the land? So what they do is the law allows them to file an objection to the taking, and most of those have to, by law, be transferred to Superior Court. And a couple weeks ago, those cases on preliminary objections can be over at the court for years. And I sent one over in 2023, and the trial is scheduled for May of 26. So it goes back to, and then it has to come back to the board to determine damages. And these people are losing land, but, you know, we see the ones where the landowner strictly, there's an issue. There's a reason they didn't negotiate.
Additional questions? Additional testimony?
Just to point out that we do have some drafted legislation on the fee changes as are expressed in the packet. If you would like that, we can distribute that.
I want you to give it to LBA.
All right, thank you so much for your
Okay,
time.
thank you. Governor's Commission on Disability. And rest assured that we will true up the numbers between House Bill 1 and 2 for you guys. You need a red light.
There you go. I apologize. Thank you for that. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, President Carson and members, senators of this honorable committee. Very nice to see all of you today. My name is Chuck Saya. I am the Executive Director of the New Hampshire Governor's Commission on Disability. And to my left is what we refer to as the GCD's Business Administrator, Ms. Stacy Dubia. Thank you for the opportunity to present before you today. And I know 10 minutes was allotted. I do have some handouts. It's a robust PowerPoint, Mr. Chair. I will.
Handouts go to him.
Oh, we've already. I'm sorry. We left them at the table. I apologize.
Oh, okay.
Did you already? Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Within the handout, Mr. Chair, is a very robust PowerPoint. I'm not going to go through every page again in the interest of time, and I'll give a very high-level review of the agency. The Governor's Commission on Disability is an executive branch state agency, organizationally structured right within the governor's office. So although we're not physically there, we are part of the governor's office. The mission of the GCD is to educate and to provide assistance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. I'm sure you're all familiar with the ADA, a monumental piece of federal legislation that ensures that discrimination cannot be based on a disability. With that, there are 14 commission members directly appointed by the governor, and we are currently a staff of 7, soon to be 8, and I'll explain that when we go through the budgetary figures. The vast majority of the funds at the GCD are general funds. There is one 100% federally funded program, as well as other funds that come into the GCD. We do have a statutory committee known as the Architecture Barrier-Free Design Committee. The ABFDC and a full-time employee of the GCD provides a pivotal piece of state contracting when a state agency is looking to enter into a real estate lease with a third-party landlord. That lease, for purposes of accessibility with the ADA, is actually reviewed by the committee with recommendations made by the GCD's accessibility specialist. With that, we also have a research and information specialist who handles a vast majority of inquiries that come into the GCD on a range from service animals to benefits and FHA matters. And another full-time person is a 100% federally funded program, which deals with Title I under the ADA, which is employment, and also serves as a resource for consumers that are navigating the vocational rehabilitation system over at the Department of Education. Various programs at the GCD. One I would like to highlight is called the NH ABLE Plan. New Hampshire's ABLE Plan launched back in 2017. That is a plan, a savings plan for individuals with disabilities, and it ensures that if you are an individual with a disability or another person who is authorized can open up an account, save for the future without jeopardizing needs-based benefits like Medicaid or SSI, Supplemental Security Income. Also applies to housing. Monumental piece of legislation that came to New Hampshire in 2017. Myself, as the executive director of the GCD and the state treasurer, co-administer New Hampshire's ABLE program without general funds. Again, a high piece of the GCD. So having said that, Mr. Chair, I'll go right into the figures. Essentially, the governor's recommended budget was adopted by the House, and I'm looking at page, we're made up of 3 accounting units. The general funded accounting unit is accounting unit 1004, which begins on page 22 of the budget book. You'll notice that the difference when we look at FY26 and FY27 goes right down to class 50, which is the part-time employees. Looking at just one fiscal year, FY26, the class 50 is made up of what we refer to as mixed funds. So there are general funds and other funds built in there. In FY26, there are other funds that come from the State Department of Education, Education Department, in the amount of $36,000. Those funds have already been obligated by the state New Hampshire Education Department of $36,000 coming to the GCD because we are under a contract with the Education Department to house a part-time employee, an individual who has been in the position since 2018, and this individual supports the statewide Independent Living Council. The most recent contract was just approved by Governor and Council. The new contract is set to begin on July 1st, 2025. So when we look at the difference in $73,000, 36 of that were funds from our New Hampshire Education Department, which funds have already been obligated. If we were to lose the 36,000, our general fund budget would increase to the tune of about $25,000, $25,211. And the same would apply in FY27. Within the $75,000, there's a $37,000 other funds from our New Hampshire Education Department under an existing contract. Federal funds have already been obligated by education through Voc Rehab for those funds to come to the GCD. And again, a loss of the $37,000 in part-time funds would increase our general funds for FY27 to the tune of $25,435. Going back to class 50, there are also general funds that are built into the $73,000 in FY26. 100% general funds in the amount of $37,000 for a part-time employee. Essentially where that emanated from, Governor Sununu had asked the Governor's Commission on Disability to put together a workforce focus group, as it was later termed, to examine the hiring practices for the state of New Hampshire as it related for the hiring of individuals with a disability in state government. One of the findings from that report was that New Hampshire would benefit from an ADA coordinator to sit at the GCD, to work very closely with our Division of Personnel to act as a resource to all of state government for individuals who may have a disability that are navigating either applying for state work or being in state employment, to sit as a resource. So that is 100% federal. It was built into the current budget. We had requested it in the prior budget as well, but this is the budget that it made it in. The position, this is a brand-new position, has been vacant. Went under the hiring freeze in January. I petitioned Governor Ayotte. She did unfreeze the position, and we have just hired an individual to begin work on May 2nd. So that, and again, in FY '27, the general funds would be to the tune of $38,000. So in that Class 50 difference that we're seeing on page 22, one represents totally other funds and one is general funds. I truly understand, the task that is before this committee in building the state budget. Respectfully, I do request your consideration of putting the general funds back in. But I would suggest that the loss of the other funds that we do get from New Hampshire Education Department could throw a proverbial greater wrench in the mechanism with the increase of the general funds. So with that, I wanted to give you a very high level. I know there's a lot before you today, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the senators? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, President Carson. Thank you, Senators.
Council on Developmental Disabilities.
Good afternoon, Senator Gray and members of the Finance Committee. My name is Isadora Rodriguez Legendre. I serve as the Executive Director of the New Hampshire Council on Developmental Disabilities. The important thing to note about our agency is that we are 100% federally funded. Our council essentially is responsible for identifying the needs of individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities in New Hampshire, developing a 5-year state plan to help reduce barriers and create opportunities for people to be fully integrated into their community when they have an intellectual or developmental disability. We do that a couple of different ways. Mostly we collaborate with other entities, other groups and organizations that have similar visions and missions to include people with disabilities in everyday life. And then we also have a small grants program. And we have a number of different grants available to the community of individuals with lived experience, family members, and then we typically support educational opportunities and programming, essentially to develop leadership within the developmental disabilities community for advocacy. We sit on various commissions and boards, councils to help bring the voice of the disability community into different spaces. And then we also collaborate on, we provide technical assistance for things like plain language, easy read formats. So a couple of the handouts that I provided are our 5-year plan and our mission statement in easy read format, which is a helpful infographic demonstrating the type of assistance we provide to other agencies and groups around the state. And then the last handout I provided is an example of our federal notice of award. That's the most recent notice of award we've received from January. We've been told that we are level funded for the rest of the federal fiscal year this year, and then we will await to see what Congress decides. However, our federal law, the DD Act, does have minimums identified for funding in the Act itself. So we're hopeful that even though traditionally we receive about $527,000 a year, the Act states that we should not receive less than $400,000. And we're hoping that we are level funded again. We've received no indication from our grantors that our funding is at risk, but you never know. So our information provided is more for your information, and our budget, the has not changed. The House adopted the governor's budget, which has 0 general funds. We are eliminating a full-time position, but that's because during this biennium, we were able to create a different full-time position. So this one is merely replacing that. We have 3 full-time and 3 part-time staff, and I'm happy to answer any question.
Questions from the senators? Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for taking my question. Since this is all federal funds, would the council have the opportunity to come before the fiscal committee for and accept and expend federal grant awards?
Yes, and we actually have in the past, during the pandemic, we received 2 separate additional federal funding allotments that were not through our typical ACL DD Act funding. We generally do not have the capacity to go after, like be the prime applicant on federal grants, just because it takes up a lot of administrative oversight and time to be able to do that. And we do have a cap on administrative costs per our notice of award.
Oh. So how do you get these federal grants if you don't have the capacity to apply to them?
So that's a great question. So 2 ways. One way is we typically will be a subrecipient on if the Institute on Disability at UNH, who typically gets larger grants, they go after a lot of federal grants related to disability, inclusion, advocacy, and information gathering. We will be named as a required partner and then receive a sub-award from those bigger grants. And then the second way is we are essentially told that we can sub out the work. So if we are told that this grant is available for DD councils specifically, we then become the pass-through. What we will do is we'll create an RFP for a contract to help address the needs associated with that grant funding, and then have a contractor fulfill the work and report back to the feds on how we spent that and manage that funding.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Executive Council.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Megan Rose, and I am the Executive Assistant to the Executive Council. Thank you for having me here today. I have passed out to everybody just a quick overview of what the office does, some of the numbers of things that we take care of throughout the year for last calendar year, but what I'd like to focus on, I think for you guys, it would be page 7 in that booklet if you want to look at that. Obviously, you have your own materials in front of you as well. And what I'm kind of focusing on is the fact that our budget is mostly people. The irony being that we don't have a lot of people in the office. It's myself, I have a part-time staff person, and then the 5 elected executive counselors. Our budget is very small. I certainly try to give back what I can when I don't use any funds. I don't try to ask for anything more than what we actually need. My part-time assistant in the office is a huge help to me. As one full-time staff member, any kind of time that you take off or would like to take off is dependent on office coverage, as I'm sure people understand. So having That funding is super important. And then everything else is just driven. Our OIT, our DOIT budget is provided to us by DOIT. And then there really just isn't anything extra above and beyond that. So the council does operate all year round, which I think most of you already know that, but, and then we meet every 2-ish weeks when we're all here together in the State House. In the summer months, we take our show on the road and we meet throughout the state. And so this is just a kind of like every 2 weeks, we continue the function of the office based around all of our governor and council meetings.
Questions from the Sunsters? They seem to be good.
Thank you.
Thank you now. And time for the treasurer. Whenever you're ready.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, State Treasurer Monica Mazzapelli. And I just brought a handout, but I would like to just essentially summarize about who we are and remind you who we are, and also what our budget contains and some of the changes that have occurred. I guess some of the changes that were part of the House budget. So, if you can turn your attention to page 3, I'll just speak about who we are. We are just, obviously, the State Treasury is a central service agency responsible for processing deposits, disbursements, and reconciling accounts. In addition to that, we are responsible for providing, managing the liquidity of the state, investing funds that are needed immediately. We issue bonds. We are responsible for managing and overseeing our debt service and all the post-issuance compliance. In addition to that, and having the oversight of investing, operating trusts and restricted funds, we also have the oversight of the unclaimed property program. And in collaboration with other commissions and committees, we have the oversight of the College Savings Program, 3 scholarship programs, the New Hampshire ABLE Plan, and the last program that was included as part of the Treasury is the New Hampshire Public Deposit Investment Pool. On page 5, it just shows a picture of how we are structured. We have 22 positions, 5 unclassified, and 17 classified positions. The rest of the presentation, it just describes some of the what is part of this budget. So essentially, some of the things that we did with this budget is move some positions around in preparation for the, we're expecting the upgrade of the accounting system. We expect some efficiencies, and based on that, and what we're trying to see and expect that will happen with that is we move some positions that were part of one unit to, for example, from cash receipting, we're moving to a reconciliation unit to facilitate bank reconciliations, and we'll eliminate some of the work that's being done there, and it will be done in this other unit. So we moved 3 positions from other places to that unit. In general, treasury operations and what we're and see the budget is it doesn't really have any increases and changes. It's pretty consistent from year to year. The same with abandoned property, no significant changes from that program in terms of personnel. The only, I guess, significant change is the request of one position. It was an entry-level accounting position that has been approved by the governor's budget and also the House budget, so that's included in this budget. On page 7, and I guess I can talk about some of the changes that that did occur as part of the House budget. And one is our budget includes the distribution of meals and rooms to municipalities. So that change, we initially had budgeted, and that's on page 7, but we had initially budgeted what the law prescribes, 30% of the net proceed of the meals and rooms tax is to be distributed to municipalities. The House decided to cap that amount to the fiscal year 25 level, and so now it's 137 million for fiscal year 26 and 27. Our agency budget also included revenue sharing, which is still part of the existing law. It was 25.2 million, but now House Bill 2 suspend that provision one more time. Page 8 and 9 of the presentation talk about debt service. Debt service, in addition to the existing debt service, we are in our budget, we include the debt service that is paid with general funds. In that debt service, again, in addition to the existing debt, we also make assumptions for upcoming years. So for fiscal year 26 and 27, we assume that 90 million of new bonding will be issued in those years. And that includes our typical estimate of between 60 and 65 million per year. But also we included the 40 million that was previously approved for the prison. That's part of the design, and my understanding is that will occur over the biennium. We had initially budgeted, as part of the governor's budget, we had initially budgeted the 40 million up front, thinking that it was going to occur in fiscal year 25. We learned from the department that they're going to try that the expenditures essentially will spread over the period of 2 years, so we were able to split the debt service. So that's the change that you see from the governor to the House budget. So I am a little, so that it's on page, if anyone is following the other comparison, that will be on page 179 of the comparison House to governor budget. House to governor budget. The other debt service that we have in our budget is the debt service for the university system that's paid with general funds. And for that, we make the assumption that we're going to issue about 10 million each year. I believe initially the governor had included 20 million of capital appropriations in House Bill 25. I think that number has changed. But again, these are the assumptions that we made as part of the process. If there's a need to adjust some of these numbers, we could certainly do that. We also have the debt service for the community college system, the debt service for the school building aid, and those are just existing debt service that we're paying as part of our obligations. On page 10, again, I'm just describing the abandoned property program, nothing really significant from previous years. The program is funded with unclaimed funds, and our largest expenditures, salaries and benefits. We have multi-state audit firms. That's our largest expenditure, in addition to the amount we paid for our unclaimed property system subscription. Page 11 talks about the collaboration we have with the College Tuition Savings Plan Advisor Committee. We have part of our budget, we include a portion of the expenditures of the expenses of the trust fund that has been there for convenience. I think over time, since we didn't really have a way to do the proper accounting of trust funds, a portion was really flowing through the accounting system, so that's why it appears in our budget. With the upgrade of the accounting system, we anticipate to do separate accounting for trust and custodial accounts, so that is probably not going to be part of the budget going forward. But one of the changes that were part of the House budget this year was the fact that part of the amount that we expect from the expect to receive and as deposited in the New Hampshire Excellence in Higher Education Endowment Trust Fund, 50 million of that is, including House Bill 2, is being, instead of staying in the trust fund, now it's going to go to fund the university system. So 15 million in each year of the biennium. The other scholarship program that we have oversight is the Governor Scholarship Fund. It's called the Governor Scholarship Program. For that, we had initially budgeted 2.7 million for this program. It has always been funded with general funds. The House decided not to fund it this year. And so there is no funding in that program now. And in addition to that, there is, in House Bill 2, there's also the direction to take some of the uncommitted funds that we anticipate at the end of this fiscal year, which is about 1.6 million, that also is going to lapse into the general fund rather than staying in the Governor Scholarship Program. So that is part of what was approved in the House budget. The page 12 just briefly talks about the Ben Thompson Trust Fund. And again, this is another expenditure that has been, again, the accounting system is being used to disperse those funds. These funds have been, are for the benefit of the university system, the beneficiary of this trust fund. We had actually, as part of this budget, Treasurer requested to repeal the laws relative to the Ben Thompson Trust Fund, just based on discussions we've had with the university system and the Department of Justice to essentially review the current trust and will of Mr. Thompson and essentially request to the court to change, to make a request so those funds, instead of being under our custody, they go, and the plan and the discussion is to send those funds to be part of the University of New Hampshire Foundation. They will essentially do the same we're doing right now, but just manage those funds for the benefit of the university. In the early discussions with the Department of Justice was there are essentially two steps for this. One is to repeal the existing laws, and the other one was to start the process with the courts. So that's why we started this process with House Bill 2. Currently working with the Department of Justice to start the process, the court process, and that's probably going to take several months to see the outcome, and we hope that that is a positive outcome for the benefit of the University of New Hampshire. In our budget, we also have the LCHIP program. I know you will hear from LCHIP separately. And the last page of the presentation is just lists what's included in House Bill 2 that relates to us. We initially requested to amend RSA 9.6 that relates to the budget. That's really to help state agencies with their management of the debt service by not lapsing those funds that they appropriate during the biennium, by not lapsing in the first year of the biennium, allows them to just manage that debt service in a better way. Sometimes it's difficult to match what they budget and what actually happens between the spending and the bonding. There's a significant time that occurs, and some significant changes happen. Sometimes there are times that the agencies need to go to fiscal to make requests. So this will actually try to assist for that matter. Again, the other request is the repeal of the Ben Thompson Trust laws, and the last request that we included in House Bill 2 was an amendment to RSA 628 that relates to hiring assistant treasurers. Right now, it has a specific number, which is number 2. The only change that we're requesting is that we change that number 2 to essentially any number. With that, if that happens, I will be able to reclassify one position. There's a classified position currently. There is a director position, and that will position, if this law passes, we will be able to move it to the unclassified system. So that's what I have for prepared remarks. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the senators, Senator Waters.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. My question's about the college savings program. So, the figure here of around, 18,300,000 and so on, and the total of the 18,888, is that likely to be, the way that program is set up, is that likely to be a stable number over the years?
I think so. Just because right now we have about, and again, the market is changing some of our numbers, but not that much. We have about 27 billion in the actual fight and a half plan. So from that, we get a portion of that. So we receive between 18 and 19 million a year. Again, that could fluctuate. But again, it's pretty, I will say, stable.
So if I could follow up on that.
Follow up?
So your current expenses related to this, is that the investment management or the 440,000? How does that?
What
break
flows through this accounting unit is mainly the payment for the audit of the 529 plan. There's some small administrative expenses like dues, and some reimbursements to Treasury for managing, for administration of that program. That's pretty much it. The investment fees do not flow through this accounting unit. They are part of, they just subtract it from the proceeds we receive.
If I could follow up. So it seems to me that the effect of this transfer, it really, whatever is done with the kind of money absent, less expenses, doesn't affect the expenses. So that if the 15 million is going over to the university system, that doesn't affect reduce or affect really the cost.
Not the administrative expenses. What will change is the purpose of the program. So right now, these funds fund primarily the 2 scholarship programs, and so those will need to be the 2 scholarship programs will need to be reviewed, and we probably have funding for fiscal year 26. We already promised schools to disperse some of those funds to universities. So it's fiscal year 27, the year that is in question, how we're going to handle that. We're not going to be able to provide the same level of scholarships that we have been providing. And then the other possible year impacted will be fiscal year 28. Just because right now we might be able to, with existing funds, we might be able to fund 1 year, but then by not receiving those funds, those scholarships will have to change. The level of service to the schools will have to change.
So the kind of where this was leading is, if we essentially decided to transfer, the 18 million rather than the 15 million, just to say that's what this funding is going to do. It's going to help supplement, kind of offset some of the cuts made to the university system. What impact would that have on how you do things?
I will say 18 is close, just to get, in case we don't receive the 18, in case there's a shift in the market. 15 is pretty safe. I know I can cover expenses, and we might be able to provide some scholarships. So if there is a desire to change this number to a higher number, I will have to probably do some just checking of numbers to make sure that we have.
Would you mind, Mr. Chairman, then, could you please do that, just so that, I guess you see the implication of my question is that if we decided to use whatever we could here for the university system, that's what this is going to do, rather than a scholarship program that it had done before. What would be your advice upon what we could reasonably do without,
Certainly.
creating too much risk or?
I'll be
so
happy to
forth.
run numbers,
So,
sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank
And
you.
certainly as we go along, LBA, when we look at the funding for the university, we need to know how this money affects the whole total budget.
Right.
Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thanks for taking my question. I'm looking at slide 7, and I caught a little bit of what the House was doing on the floor last week, but I missed some of it. My understanding was that a suspension of the 30% of rooms and meals tax and level funding it was removed from House Bill 2. And that the other bullet point is that the House budget eliminates revenue sharing, not suspends it.
Is that a question better for LBA? And he may not know right
No,
now.
I do not know off the top of my
All
head.
right.
Senator.
That's a
Well,
very
that-
good question because I have not seen the language of House Bill 2. I thought I was suspending the law, and again, I thought the law was still in place and just suspended for the biennium, but I really haven't seen that language yet. So I'm not, so I can look into it.
Maybe LBA could check on those two provisions.
As long as you understand the question, I'm sure we'll get an email.
And what I see on page, so looking at the actual comparison House to Governor's budget on page 176, I still see that the House passed capping the amount to 137 million in fiscal year 26 and 27. And so that is, again, the 137 million is comparable to what is being paid in fiscal year 25. But I do see that's still in this document, at least I'm reviewing. Am I wrong?
Okay?
Okay, good.
Expect an email. Senator Birdsall.
Thank you for taking my question. Just for clarification, on this Ben Thompson Trust Fund transfer, is that a request from UNH?
So this is just so what is happening is we've been paying this, the intention of Mr. Well was to, and it's obviously was to pay income to keep this fund in perpetuity and then pay income to the University of New Hampshire. That amount that we pay every year has been on the books since 1909, 1907. That amount needs to be reviewed and changed. It's just, is either we, so, and so that was part of the discussions. We need to review this amount, we need to pay the correct amount. So that requires a lot, the court to get involved. So again, part of the discussions that I've had with the university system, Department of Justice, is interest in the university system essentially taking over the fund. They will do the same work that we're doing, overseeing, having custody of the fund, but the University of New Hampshire Foundation will manage that, just similar to what they do with other endowments. So that's sort of the plan. Again, the court may look at that request and say that's not a good idea. So that's part of what what will happen over the next few months to decide what will be the best course. But again, part of that discussion was from DOJ, the laws. One of the steps that need to happen is the laws in New Hampshire need to change.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Additional questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And LCHIP's next. And don't be concerned, you know, even us senators need a comfort break every once in a while, but it is all being recorded so they can go back and catch up. Okay. We need a red light, and whenever you're ready.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Paula Belmore for the Land and Community Heritage Investment Program. Most of you are very familiar with our program, so I'll be brief and maybe help you make up some time. LCHIP was established in 2000 by the General Court in order to help private-public partnerships to preserve and conserve important resources across the state. We've been doing it since that time and very successfully. Since 2008, we have been doing that without support of the general fund. In 2008, the General Court adopted a surcharge on documents when they're recorded at our Registry of Deeds, and that surcharge is what we use for grant funding. The surcharge generates roughly $4 million a year. That amount goes up and down with the pace of real estate transactions. And I say pace really clearly. It has nothing to do with the value not real estate transfer tax, which is based on real estate value, but simply the number of transactions that are happening. Our current budget, I think it was in fiscal year 21, where our budget for our appropriation was raised from 3.5 million to 5 million. And the reason for that is the fluctuations in when we actually take the money out and give it to the grantees can change. A grant cycle can be up to 5 years. So while we may generate revenue of roughly $4 million a year, we often will hit a year where our grantees have completed their grant obligation and our expenditures exceed, in the past was 3.5 million. So we were having to go to fiscal to get approval to expend. When we set our budget at 5 million, that eliminates that. And our expenditures for the past 4 years have averaged about 5 million, I think 5.15, which I've laid out for you in the materials. So we'd like to hold at 5 million, and that is what both the governor and the House budget call for. And I think other than that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions from the senators? Seeing none, thank you very much.
You're welcome, thank you.
CDFA.
Good afternoon. I'm Katie Easterly Marte. I'm the Executive Director of the Community Development Finance Authority. Thank you for the opportunity to address you regarding our one line, which is part of the Treasury budget, and it's the required match for the administration of the Community Development Block Grants. I'm here to request continued match funding from the state of New Hampshire. The request of $280,000, which was in the Governor and House's budget, allows for the administration of the Community Development Block Grants, which is approximately an investment of $19 million a year. For more than 20 years, CDFA has provided the state with exceptional, cost-effective system for administering these CDBG resources. The program is focused on the development of viable, sustainable communities by providing decent housing, suitable living environments, and expanding economic opportunities. I have some projects that are in the presentation that was passed out in front of you that just represent some of those investments that have been made across New Hampshire. You can see on the map that the investments are across the entirety of New Hampshire, and we work in our administrative capacity to provide technical assistance, compliance support, and other supports that allow a municipality to utilize these community development resources. As you can see, expanding affordable housing opportunities. The picture is from Conway, the Bluebird Project. Public facilities in Keene, the 100-night shelter that was moved from a temporary facility to a permanent facility, providing temporary housing for individuals. The rehabilitation of the Brown School in Berlin, the building of the Little Antlers childcare facility in Plymouth, and small business support like the plumbing and heating company that received technical assistance from one of the grantees to be able to build their business. CDFA's required match request will allow us to continue to invest $19 million over the biennium into communities. Every community across New Hampshire, regardless of size, except for entitlement communities, is eligible for these resources. They can receive an allocation of funding to support a housing, public facility, or economic development project. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have about our request.
Questions from the senators? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.
I thought you was. Department of State.
Well, they get 20 minutes, that's plush.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm David Scanlon, Secretary of State, and with me is my key person, Paula Penny. She'll be happy to answer your questions. Seriously, the House amended our budget. We're certainly willing to work with what they proposed. Would like to ask for some changes, though. They decided to abolish some positions within the department. We're fine with most of those because they've been vacant. but there are a couple that I'd like to just discuss with the committee. First is in the Securities Bureau. They eliminated an Assistant Secretary of State position there. I would like to ask that that be kept. You can unfund it for the biennium if you would like, but I think it's important to have that position there. There is a Deputy Secretary position that is vacant now because Eric Forcier, who was in that position, was placed in the director position that was held by Barry Glennon when he retired. And so I don't think we need that position, and I would like to have that one, ask to have that one abolished. And then the other position is a business administrator position in corporations that's currently vacant, and it has been for a while, but I expect that could be useful in the not-too-distant future as we get ready to change over our corporation's software program, and the kind of the financial software that we use within the department. I think that position could be very important to help that project go smoothly. So I would ask that we keep that. Other than that, the House requested that we cut funds on the back end of the budget. We're certainly willing to do our part there, and I'm not recommending any changes. So with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the senators? Usually we get a presentation on wrestling and all kinds of good things. We're not going to do that.
I kind of missed that, but boxing and wrestling now belongs to OPLC, so you'll have to hear from them about it.
Okay. All right, well, then thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
And we're actually ahead of schedule, but we got the Right to Know Ombudsman people here.
Okay.
All right, come on up. That way. Well, that's why we're trying to tell you.
Well, good afternoon, Senators. I'm Thomas F. Kerr. I'm the Right to Know Ombudsman, and that's a position that was first staffed in 2023, in the middle of a fiscal year that was budgeted before I existed, and it will expire by law at midnight on June 30th unless it's renewed prior to that time. As I'm fond of saying, I brought my entire agency with me today. That's because to date, the office consisted of just me. What I do is summarized in my first annual report and its supplement that's going around. Basically, I process and I decide complaints that are filed under RSA 91A, the state's right to know law, when they're filed with me for $25 as opposed to the Superior Court for several $100s. And I do all the backup and things that are necessary in order to achieve that. I won't belabor it. It's in my report. I imagine that this presentation is a little bit different than most, but I'll do my best to summarize where things stand in 5 minutes. My situation is somewhat unique because at present we're not simply faced with the question of what the agency's budget was in the past years and how it compares to what's proposed in the future. Given the adjustments that were proposed by the House, there's no real comparison between those numbers, but I understand the committee would like to hear the differences between fiscal year 2024 actual expenses. Those were $148,905. Fiscal year 25 adjusted authorized, $170,706. And the fiscal year 26 and 27. 26 has been proposed for $29,503, and 2027 for $27,001. That might sound kind of odd, but that's because as a result of some developments in the House There's now, within the budget, a question of whether the agency will continue to exist, and if so, in what form. That wasn't originally part of the budget. There was a standalone bill that was introduced this past session, House Bill 111, that would simply have continued this experimental agency for an additional 2 years. For that, in the budget, there was proposed about the same amount as currently exists, $170,000 total. That's what was proposed. House Bill 111, the bill extending the agency, passed House Judiciary Committee with amendments, but the bill was retained in House Finance, which instead suggested the alternatives that are found in House Bill 2 at pages 104 to 105. Essentially, that language proposes that the RKO, restructured RKO, Right to Know Ombudsman, be attached with another agency, Personnel Appeals Board, to the Public Employee Labor Relations Board, and that would presumably allow for some staff support through the PERLB, whose proposed budget is therefore pretty closely connected to the RKO's. As one-man agency, I undoubtedly need some support in some form if I'm going to continue, or it is going to continue at some point into the future. The proposal in House Bill 2 would change the compensation of the RKO to a stipend plus an hourly rate for writing and some other forms of compensation. Let's see, my current position is abolished in House Bill 1 at page 716, a footnote. And given the substantial activity that I've got, I can't say with certainty that under the payment system that's proposed, the potential added personnel of the PERLB and the office's work and so forth at the budgeted amounts of $29,000 and $27,000 would necessarily cover the work that the office is going to be required to do. It would, however, allow the agency to get perhaps what it needs most, which is some support in the performance of its work. So as discussed in my annual report, right now the jobs of a number of people fall on me by myself. I haven't had the opportunity to thoroughly review the proposals made for the PERLB's budget to accommodate proposed consolidation of various agencies. A couple of points I'd like to make in the House Bill 2 proposed language is that if there's no law in effect as of June 30th at midnight to continue this office, it will expire, and a complete restart would be required. I'm presently preparing parties in case that's a possibility that the office might soon cease to exist or might exist in another form. And that's difficult to do when you're also scheduling hearings and conferences and processing cases as they're coming in. Apart from funding aspects, there might be some technical difficulties in the proposed House Bill 2 language. For example, it says that the rules that currently exist will remain in effect. That could pose a difficulty if you ever want to amend your rules, because it says those rules continue in effect. So I'm not sure where the committee would like to go with this presentation, but so what I will do is I will say, any questions I can answer?
Questions from the senators? Tim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Kerr. It's always a pleasure to see you. One of the reasons why this office was created was to really kind of divert questions out of the court system. Because usually what happens is someone makes a request and they don't get it fast enough, or there's some issues, and the only way they could resolve it was to go to court. And we wanted to make this system more accessible for people, that there's an alternative to court. Do you have any kind of an idea how much money this office has saved over the past 2 years?
I don't. I know the court has had some reduction in things that are filed there, which is a reduction in funds because they're not getting the money that they would have gotten. But it's difficult for me to say how many cases have been avoided. I can say that I've had since I've started, right about 300 inquiries now. Of those 330, trying to add up the number. 36, 37, and 12, whatever that is. That's how many cases I've had. I sometimes think that the mere existence of my office helps things resolve themselves. By what I'll do in inquiries, for example, is say, you know, you really ought to talk to each other. Because one of the first things I have people do after we get all the pleadings in the way that the statute requires it, opposing parties 20 days to respond, I have to send out an order of notice of a hearing within 60 days of the filing. And the first thing I do is I have a pre-hearing conference with everybody. I try to sit down and try and have them work it out. And I would say a good chunk of the cases work themselves out between the parties. So I don't know how many have been avoided, but I have a sneaking suspicion that a number of cases have been avoided just by people being more informed about the process.
May I follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Thank you. As you know, last year, I think it was last year, we passed House Bill 1002, which dealt with the right to know law and changing the number of requests and things of that nature. Have you seen a reduction in cases filed since that's been law?
No, I haven't had a case that comes up that has involved specifically that issue. One hasn't come to me.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
I was thinking how appropriate it is to have you here today.
There's nothing happy about it.
I did address a letter to yesterday. Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Lindsay Stepp. I'm the commissioner at the Department of Revenue. Should all have a copy of the presentation. I'll move pretty quickly. I think we were given about 20 minutes. So I'll move quickly, but happy to stop for questions or answer questions at the end. First, starting on page 2, the mission of the Department of Revenue is to fairly and efficiently administer the tax laws of the state of New Hampshire, collecting the proper amount of taxes due, incurring the least cost to taxpayers in a manner that merits the highest degree of public confidence in our integrity. Further, we provide prompt and constructive assistance to the municipal units of government in the matters of budget, finance, and the appraisal of real estate. On page 3, just a high-level overview of the DRA. All the way on the left, we have the administration unit. That's the commissioner's office, legal and tax policy, and then your traditional back office functions such as HR, business office, internal audit. Moving into the audit division, we separate out our auditors in kind of complexity. So we have in-state auditors, which primarily audit New Hampshire-only businesses, multi-entity auditors, which will audit New England regional businesses, multi-state auditors who will do kind of the large Fortune 500 type businesses. We have a discovery unit who looks for non-filers, and then a specific tobacco unit to make sure that we are properly checking for tobacco tax stamps per the master settlement agreement. We have our collections division, which once all appeal rights have been exhausted, we pursue collection activity. Our taxpayer services division, those are going to be the folks that you talk to if you're not under audit and we're not trying to collect from you. So they process the documents, they man our call center, and they perform routine taxpayer account maintenance. And lastly is our municipal and property division, and those are the folks that interact with the municipalities on a daily basis in terms of setting tax rates, assisting with property appraisal, utility property tax, and administering the gravel and timber taxes. On page 4, the Department of Revenue's big picture agency budget for 26 and 27. So we've included here the 24 actual expense, 25 adjusted authorized, and then the House budget for 26 and 27. And then we've broken that budget down between general funds, education trust funds, and agency income. I'll walk through each of those funds in the presentation. The main difference that you'll see between fiscal year 24 actual expense and fiscal year 25 adjusted authorized is largely due to a vacancy rate of 16.5% at the end of fiscal year 24. That vacancy rate is currently at 20% or 31 positions. You'll also notice that our budget is primarily general funds, 85% general funds. And when you look also from 24 and you go all the way to 26 and 27, you'll see that there is a budget increase there, and that's largely due to operationalizing the revenue information management system. I'll talk more about that in a little bit, but RIMS, as we've referred to it, is our main technology system that we use to administer the taxes that we are responsible for. Going to page 5, just some highlights for the 26-27 budget. Our general fund operating budget, as I said, we're about 85% general funds, and of that, 70% is salary and benefits. So we are a department of people, not things or programs. One thing that you will not see in our 26-27 is there are no general funds that are being used to replace previously received ARPA funds. So the department received ARPA funds in fiscal year 24, and those were to do 3 upgrades to existing technology. When we did that, I negotiated with the vendors to not change our support and maintenance costs. So the ARPA funds could be used one-time money for one-time spend. So there is no increase to our budget in 26 and 27 due to needing to replace ARPA funds. And lastly, the division directors of business office and our managers work very closely as the primary revenue collection agency. We certainly understand the current revenue picture, and so we wanted to make sure we were doing our part in terms of meeting revenue and budget targets, and so we have scrubbed every line of our budget. You will see if you look at the difference between the governor and the House budgets that there are very small adjustments in some places. That's because we were literally scrubbing every line. And if we found $1,000 that we thought we could give up, we gave the House $1,000. So we've been through this with a fine-tooth comb. On page 6, when we look at the general fund, which again is the primary source of our funding for the department, the general fund results in current full-time funded position counts reducing by 18 positions from 153 funded positions to 129 positions. So positions are retained, they're not abolished, but they are unfunded. So we are unfunding 18 positions. That includes 9 tax auditors, 9 tax examiners, 2 administrators, 2 appraisers, 1 paralegal, and 1 statistician. So it impacts all of our divisions that have vacancies. All of the positions that are unfunded are currently vacant, so there are no layoffs in our budget. We also made reductions to current expenses, out-of-state travel, training, and equipment. Like I said, we went through this with a fine-tooth comb. On page 7, I mentioned the need to operationalize RIMS. So RIMS began as a $30,160,000 capital appropriation for hardware, software, licensing, and maintenance. And that a capital appropriation will last for hardware maintenance and software licensing through fiscal 25 and will last for software maintenance or consulting through the first quarter of 24. So we are needing to absorb these costs in our operating budget. Up until this point, they have been funded by capital. So our budget includes full operationalizing of these expenses, again, for software licensing, maintenance services, as well as a migration to a cloud-based environment. We currently have an on-premise hardware solution that is at end of life, and so we will be moving to the cloud. So the cost for RIMS in fiscal year 26 is $2.8 million, and the cost for RIMS in fiscal year 27 is $2.9 million. Moving on to the education trust fund portion of our budget, The only thing that's in there is low and moderate income hardship grants. So Chapter 95, Laws of 2021, increased the income limitations and the maximum amount of tax relief for the L&M program. So there was an increase in the appropriation for fiscal year 24, and 25 is sufficient to fund the programs pursuant to these changes. So it's about $1.5 million a year. In the last claim year, which was fiscal year 2023, which corresponded with the April 1st, 2023 tax period, we issued 5,811 claims totaling just under 1.2 million. This program will open up again on May 1st. We've got a significant number of inquiries already wondering about this program, and I think that is largely due to the increase in property values and property taxes that many of our residents have seen. So I anticipate that this will be another busy year for the low and moderate program, but the budget is sufficient to cover what I believe the claims will be. And then on page 9, the last section of our budget is agency income. And there's two things in here. First is flood control. Those of you that have been around for a while might remember conversations about flood control. So fiscal year 26 and 27, the budget assumes that Massachusetts will reimburse their share of the 70% of the Merrimack River Valley Compact, as well as 50% of the Connecticut River Valley Compact, and Connecticut will reimburse their share of 40% of the Connecticut River Valley Compact. There's a long history of Massachusetts not paying its obligation timely or sufficiently for the Merrimack River Valley Compact. We did receive a payment of just under $3.5 million for fiscal years 2015 through 2022, and that was a settlement that was negotiated with the help of the Attorney General's office. We received a payment of just under $1 million for fiscal years 22 and 23, but so far we've received no payment for 24 and 25. So the outstanding amount there is $928,203. Moving on. The other portion of agency income is RIMS debt service. So that $30,160,000 that the agency received to purchase RIMS initially, that is now running out this year, that was funded in two ways. One was $6 million of general fund debt, and the remaining $24,160,000 principal and interest is going to be funded through revenue uplift. So our RIMS system does generate revenue. We calculate the amount of revenue that we receive that we wouldn't have received in our old system. And in fiscal year 2024, that amount was $14.5 million. And that was through the issuance of reminder to pay letters. Turns out if you just remind folks that they have a debt, they'll pay it. Improved use of federal tax information, and then we now allow taxpayers to apply for automated payment plans. So they can have little to no interaction with a human, they can do it all online and set up a payment plan. So again, we generated $14.5 million in 2024. To date, RIMS went live on August 9th of 2021. August 9th of 2021 through the end of fiscal year 24, we have generated $31.1 million in revenue uplift. So just about 3 years past implementation, and the system has essentially paid for itself. So what we do is we calculate that revenue uplift, and then we can transfer a maximum of $4 million out of the general fund and into this RIMS debt service account every year for the purposes of paying off the principal and interest on that $24,160,000. So that's what's reflected in agency income. So our debt service payments for fiscal year 2026 will be $2.4 million, and 27 will be just over $2.3 million. Last thing to cover on page 11, I just wanted to highlight a few select House Bill 2 sections. One is section 169, unfunded positions. This would allow executive agencies to fill unfunded positions if the total expenditures do not exceed the appropriation for personnel and benefits. This would be very helpful to us. As I mentioned, we are unfunding 18 positions. We are going down to a head count of 129 positions. That will be the lowest head count the department has had in over 20 years. I'm confident that we can get the work done, but this would give us some flexibility that when positions become vacant, we can evaluate the best use of the money for that position. Is the best use to remain recruiting for that position, or could we potentially reallocate that money to one of the unfunded positions? And then there's two slight tweaks to some programming that we have in RIMS. One is the amount of revenue that goes to the Education Trust Fund for the business profits tax, business enterprise tax, tobacco tax, and the real estate transfer tax. Those are just percentages that are programmed in RIMS. So if we change the percent as it's listed in House Bill 2, that's a quick, easy change for us to make in the system. And then lastly is the tax on meals and rooms and the amount of transfer into the municipal revenue transfer fund. House Bill 2 sets that at an amount equal to what was transferred in fiscal year 25, which will be $137 million. Again, that's a very easy change for us to effectuate. So there would be no costs associated with us effectuating these transfers. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the senators? Senator Rosenbaum.
Thank you. Thanks for taking my question. So when I'm looking at the numbers on House Bill 1, is the permanent class, the first line, the 010 account, is that where those 18 positions are unfunded?
So it'll be a combination of class 10 and class 11, because some of them are classified and some are unclassified. They're unfunded in the governor and also in the House. The House did not unfund any additional positions, nor did they add back any positions. So if you're looking on page 158, you're looking at the administration unit. And if you look at class 10, where you see just over $1 million in fiscal year 25 adjusted authorized, and then that goes down to just about 762 in 26. That's the result of us unfunding 3 positions in the administration unit.
So could I follow up? Thank you. I know in the past, we've projected an amount that in-state and multi-state auditors can account
Generate.
for.
Yes.
Is that still necessary with RIMS, or if we didn't unfund those positions, how much more revenue would we generate from people paying their taxes?
Sure. So right now, all of the positions that are unfunded are vacant. So there's no essentially negative impact to revenue immediately because there's no one in the position doing the work currently. But as I said, we do have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We do have 9 auditors that are unfunded, and that is a combination of in-state auditors, multi-entity auditors, and multi-state auditors, so all of our different levels. Those positions generate in any given year, I would say between $200,000 for an in-state auditor, $200,000 to $300,000, $600,000 to $700,000 for a multi-entity auditor, and our multi-state auditors will generate between $1.5 to $3 million, sometimes more if they have a good case. So the balance that I think we're trying to achieve is being able to recruit and hire for these positions, because in prior budgets, we have had additional positions provided to the department, and then we've struggled quite a bit to recruit people given the salaries. That might be changing with some of the layoffs happening at the federal level. There are some folks that work for a three-letter federal agency that might be interested in working for a state agency because they don't have their job at their federal agency anymore. So that could change, but it's tough to know because we haven't tried to actively recruit for those positions in a little while because we hadn't been very successful. So if the positions were funded and we could recruit for them, they would generate money. But I think that, I'll be honest, if the provision stays in House Bill 2 that would allow us to potentially recruit for those unfunded positions so long as we stay within our budget, those might be some of the positions I look to first.
Certainly, I've asked LBA to look into things like some kind of a revenue account that could offset new positions and stuff, so I'm interested in hearing what their answer is, because,
Okay, sure.
you know, if you are generating the revenue, then certainly it behooves us to give you the position, so.
Sure.
Questions? Senator Bertzel.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my question. Granted, Massachusetts has paid us for fiscal year 22 and 23. Is there any thought of going after them for 24 and 25 in their?
It's just under about $1 million that's
Yep.
owed. So I will say, we haven't necessarily had those conversations yet, but I will give them credit that the Merrimack River Valley Compact, so it's a group of representatives from the states that are impacted. That compact was kind of non-existent or non-functional for a while. I think the most recent settlement has kind of dusted off that group, and they are starting to meet with some regularity. So we haven't received the money yet, but part of me is holding out hope that this group just needs to get their feet back under them again, and we'll start to see the money.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions? Seeing none.
Thank you.
All right, status. We're at the end of our today's list. Our next meeting is Friday at?
1:30, because you have fiscal, I think, number 1.
Okay.
So 1:30.
And we'll continue on. I have had a suggestion from someone that they would like us to go on the road with hearings, and I said that I didn't think that there was any real spot that we could actually fit that in and do the rest of the work along with the rest of the committees we're on. But I said that I would bring it up here for you guys to chime in on. Senator Rosenbaum.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would hope we would do that. I realize it would have to be in the evening, but there are just many people who can't get to Concord during the weekdays from work or from childcare responsibilities, and I hope that we will take the opportunity to go to where residents are so we can really hear their concerns.
In the years that I've been either in the House or the Senate, I don't remember that happening. Do you remember the last time it actually happened?
Yes, in the House, we definitely did it.
When? What year?
22. Certainly earlier in the 2000s, we did a whole series of hearings around the state. I remember going to Tamworth.
The things that I'm hearing
Manchester.
is that the House did some hearings. I'm trying to think back if the Senate ever did them, and because I didn't hear anything about what?
We did.
13, 14 in the House in 15, 16, and then the Senate, I just don't remember them. And
4 years ago, when Senator D'Alessandro was the chair, we did one here in Concord, and we did one in Manchester.
Oh.
not too old to change our ways.
Again, the problem with me isn't necessarily whether to do it or not do it. It's how do you fit it in? And I know that my other major committee, you know, has a lot of bills to do, so trying to fit that in with other things. I mean, they have the opportunity of calling, coming in for a meeting, you know, providing written testimony. I've even had people, when they call in, provide the testimony on my answering machine here in the State House, so. So unless there's an overwhelming, you know, request to go do it, I just don't know how we would fit it in, so.
It would have to be in the evening.
I hear you.
So, again, it sounds like your idea is along the line of what we did with the redistricting commission, right? It traveled the state with each county to have a conversation, allow that input on what we're going to be developed as we came along. So.
And when we did that with the redistricting committee, when we got to like Sullivan and Grafton County, we were in the courts because there wasn't another facility that would really accommodate us. We were in the schools in a couple of different places to do that.
We also weren't in session at the time, we didn't have any other really committee work to do. That, I mean, you've got ED&A that's slammed. You've got, judiciary is slammed. I think it's going to be kind of a tough, if they're in there all day.
So is there anybody else that wants to talk before I take a straw man vote? Okay. Senator Waters.
You know, given the general feeling in the public about access and trust of government and so on and so forth, if it's possible, and I would think maybe we could do it at 5 o'clock in the afternoon here, you know, maybe in Reps Hall, but if it is possible to have one opportunity for it.
Well, there will be an opportunity because when we have the public hearing on May the 6th, it will be from 1 to 5, and then we will take a lunch break and we will start again at 6. So, you know, those who can make it to Concord, you know, we'll have that opportunity in the evening.
Okay.
So just a show of hands who wants to go on the road. And show of hands of who doesn't want to go on the road.
Somebody voted twice.
All right. Any other business before us today? With that, our business of the day being complete, we are adjourned.